Welcome back to the channel, Greg Allen F1. Before we get into the power rankings following the Spanish Grand Prix, remember to give this video a like and a subscribe. It definitely helps me out with the YouTube algorithm and gives me the motivation to keep making these videos. I appreciate all of your support and everyone who tunes in to my weekly to bi-weekly videos, and it gives me the motivation to pump out more content on this channel. Every one of you that has subscribed so far, I really appreciate it. Formula One, we're on a break now until Monaco. Cannot wait to actually get to the Monaco Grand Prix. McLaren releasing some very cool colors for their cars for that Grand Prix. Wishing it was not a one-off. I think that car looks fantastic. I like their normal livery as well, but this one, if you haven't seen it, make sure you go look. Spanish Grand Prix, definitely a typical Grand Prix for what we get in Spain. Maybe a little more exciting than what we normally get in the Spanish Grand Prix, but it'll be very interesting. Now for the power rankings, what I mean by that, for the power rankings will be interesting because I had a request, like I mentioned in my last video, to add a points system to the power rankings, and that's what I'm going to do. At the end of this video, I will show you. It is all of my power rankings this season, including this one, and I'll give you a ranking of all the drivers. The way we're going to do it, first place gets 10 points, second place 9 points, and so forth down to 10th, and I'll put up the full driver standings at the end of this one. But first, I got to tell you where each driver falls in my power rankings this week. So, underneath my cut line, I only have one driver this time, and it's Lance Stroll. And he's the only one who I feel was even close to cracking my top 10. And that's honestly just because he keeps outperforming his teammate and has really been the only bright spot of what's been a pretty miserable year for Aston Martin so far. Sebastian Vettel, might do a video on him this week. He's been on my mind a lot the last couple weeks, based on a question that a friend of mine asked me. And it's kind of prompted me to maybe want to put a video out about where Sebastian Vettel is in his career and where his standing in that team is, and what his future in Formula One just might be, if anything, based on what's happening right now. But Lance Stroll, on the other side of things, has been really good. He keeps outperforming his teammate, and he keeps pushing that top 10 race in, race out. This team just in general just is not where I thought they'd be, and that's kind of sad. So coming in at number 10 on my power rankings this week, Pierre Gasly comes in at number 10 for me. Second time I've had him in 10th place on the power rankings. He's consistently in my top 10, but I think in general, overall, AlphaTauri has not had the year I was kind of hoping they would. I feel like that car is faster than what we've seen, but I will say they didn't look great in Spain, and we're starting to be 4, 5, 6 Grand Prix into this season, and they're not really impressing me too much. So Pierre, I think, is a really good driver. Maybe he's coming down to earth a little bit this year from the incredible season he had last year, or maybe the momentum's just starting to build, but we're going to see what happens with Gasly moving forward. I'm very interested in whether or not he'll be in the whole Red Bull organization in a year or two regardless, but if he wants to be and really dictate his future in Formula One, another year like last year is what he needs to have this year, and so far it's been underwhelming for me. I do think he can turn it around, but good enough performances, though, to give him 10th place on my power rankings. 9th place for me is Alpine driver Esteban Ocon. So Ocon, I thought, had a really good week in Spain. I feel like once again, every week, I feel Ocon gets better and better. And Alonso, for me, has been all over the place, right? So for that team, Alonso has weeks where he looks really good and other weeks where he finishes kind of far back like he did in Spain. Unfortunately for him, not always his fault, obviously. But Esteban Ocon, I feel like he's been building momentum and slowly getting into that top 10 week in and week out. And if he continues doing what he did last year, and maybe does it at a little bit quicker pace this season, we could see Esteban Ocon really pushing that 10th through 6th place position week in and week out. And that would be really great for Alpine and for Ocon himself. So I just wanted to give him a nod, and that's why he makes it to 9th on my power rankings this week. A really solid weekend for him and that team. Another team that hasn't been maybe as fast as I thought they would be. So good job for Esteban Ocon in the Spanish Grand Prix. He makes it up to 9th place on my power rankings. 8th place for me is Checo, Sergio Perez. And by the way, it's not going to be blue for the whole board, just they're all kind of similar color race cars. So Checo up to 8th place. So Sergio Perez, for me, a really interesting case. We're starting to hear that stuff about the number 2 seat at Red Bull again. It hasn't been good enough, right? So I have been saying all along on this channel that Sergio needs any driver probably needs 10 to 12 races to really fit in with their team in a good way and be comfortable in that seat. Gasly didn't even get that at Red Bull. That said, I felt for Checo we were going to be looking more around 4 to 6 races, And while the Spanish Grand Prix was a more solid run, he's not up there in a way that is going to help Max Verstappen and Red Bull actually outpace and beat the Mercedes. So it needs to get better for Checo. It needs to get better probably quicker. He's probably feeling more pressure here than he's ever felt in Formula One. I still am a huge believer in Sergio, and I believe truly that he's going to win a race this year. I think that car is too good, and he's too good of a driver not to figure it out. But it is interesting that the media and fans are slowly starting to get on him the way they did with Gasly and Ocon, which is honestly questionably toxic. But that said, it's the reality of if you step into that Red Bull number 2 seat behind a driver like Max Verstappen. For me, if Checo doesn't figure it out and this team still doesn't really get to where the number 2 seat needs to be, I think Red Bull needs to reassess how they maybe go about setting up their cars, and maybe that conversation of their setup only for Max really comes into it more. But for now, I think we're still working on, hey, Checo, we need to get you up into that top 4 and splitting up those Mercedes more. And he's just been a little bit behind, too far behind to do that. So there's been moments of brilliance so far. We see him get himself on the front row for qualifying. But Sundays haven't really come through for him just yet. We'll see what happens, though, in Monaco. 7th place for me is Carlos Sainz Jr. So Sainz has been a really, really interesting and fun story this year. Has a pretty solid Spanish Grand Prix at his home track, but in general, Ferrari is getting better and better. And I've said it in other videos that it seems that Ferrari is really setting themselves up to be a major competitor probably next year. But this year, don't count them out. They are very much in the competition for 3rd in the Constructors. And with a couple of podiums and maybe a surprise win, which is not out of the question for this team if something happens to those top 2 teams in a Grand Prix, which we saw happen plenty of times last year. It's not really out of question that Sainz or more likely Charles Leclerc could possibly get a win or at least get on the podium a little bit more frequently. I've really liked what I've seen out of Ferrari, and I really like what I've seen out of Carlos Sainz. He's really adjusted to that car quickly. Maybe the best driver on the grid in a new team that has adjusted the fastest. He looks very comfortable in that car for the most part. Really good, solid performance. He's been pretty frequently between that 6th, 7th, and 8th place for me in my power rankings so far. And if he keeps this up, he'll slowly keep marching up these rankings. So good job for him. Good job for Ferrari. Daniel Ricciardo, 6th place for me. And again, another decent week for Ricardo. I think for Ricardo, it was a better week than Norris. Lando Norris definitely struggled in the Spanish Grand Prix, struggled in qualifying. I felt like both those cars were probably faster than where they were able to get to. The Spanish Grand Prix is always traditionally very difficult for overtakes. Lando kind of got stuck back around 9th place the entire race and couldn't really get out of it. Ricardo, though, puts in a really good effort. He has an okay qualifying and then has a pretty solid finish at the Spanish Grand Prix. He seems to be getting more and more comfortable. He says that every week. He talks about it, that he's not quite 100% comfortable in that car just yet. And if that's the case, we could be in for a thrilling second half of the season with Daniel Ricciardo. I'm actually very happy with where he is already. I thought this was going to be more of a first year at Renault for him, where he was kind of maybe getting points some days, maybe finishing just out of the points other days. He's been solidly in the points pretty much every week. So solid stuff for him. Drops back a little bit this week for me from previous spots I've had him on it. But I think we could be in for a really exciting second half with Ricardo. 5th place, the other McLaren boy. So Lando Norris does drop a little bit from I believe he was up 3rd last week. You can check out that video. No, but seriously, Lando Norris had a pretty rough Spanish Grand Prix by all accounts, but mainly his account. He was definitely frustrated all weekend long. Doesn't have a really good Saturday. Can't get his car way up the grid where it should have been. I think the car's was pretty fast, but in general, a weekend that was kind of an outlier from what has been a really good start to the season for Lando Norris. And again, this is kind of reminding me of 2020 where he was, right out of the gate super fast for the first 3 or 4 Grand Prix and then kind of faded in the middle of the year. So that's going to be a big red flag right here of whether or not that's going to continue in 2021 where he has a great start and then kind of peters out in the middle part. I don't think that's the case, though. I think they just had a bad qualifying, and the Spanish Grand Prix, like I said before, is a little difficult to actually overtake in. And I think they just got stuck there on strategy and inability to overtake. So I look for him to maybe have a little bit better time in Monaco, and if not, like the next couple of races. If we get 4 or 5 Grand Prix later and he's been hanging around 8th, 9th, and 10th again, different conversation. He'll be way further down in his power rankings. But for now, we're not going to overreact to one weekend that was probably a little below Lando Norris and McLaren standards this year, which is a great thing, by the way. Fourth place for me is the hardest driver to put on my power rankings, Valtteri Bottas, for two reasons. I can never know what I'm going to get from Valtteri Bottas when it comes to any given weekend in that Mercedes. And every time I put Valtteri Bottas in my power rankings, someone makes fun of the way I say it because I have a horrible American accent apparently with it. I do my best though. Either way, I felt that Valtteri Bottas did a really good job in the Spanish Grand Prix, and I think he was more effective as a second driver, helping Mercedes manage strategy and help Lewis Hamilton get a win. And he did it in a way that he also has not compromised his own strategies. He made a point of that, and not just this Grand Prix, he's done it in other Grand Prix, but doesn't hold up Lewis Hamilton enough to where Lewis Hamilton was in danger of maybe not winning this race, but also shows that, hey, I'm here to race as well. And I like that attitude. It matters a lot, but driver championship-wise, I've had him way further down this list because I feel as an individual competitor and a chance of being a world champion, that's slipping away, and it's slipping away fast for Valtteri Bottas this season. He needs to win. He needs to win often in the next couple races for him to have any outside chance of being in this championship competition. Right now, he just looks like a really good, solid number 2 driver at Mercedes. There's nothing wrong with that. Sign me up if I could do that, and I'm sure a lot of other drivers would say that too. But I think he's just capable of so much more, and it just hasn't come out. And last year, it was a lot of bad luck. This year, it just looks like there's a little bit missing. I've had him all over my board because my expectation was his expectation, right? My expectation was that he would be battling for a championship this year, and it would be at least a 3 to 4 dog fight for that top spot. And right now it's not. Him and Checo really aren't in the conversation. So if you look at it from a team standpoint and being a really good, solid second driver and a guy who's going to podium for you a lot, I put him up here because I think he did a really good job of achieving Mercedes' overall goals. From an individual standpoint, though, I probably could have had him on the other side of the board again. So either way, I'm having a difficult time placing him in my power rankings, and hopefully some more consistency will allow me to have him a more consistent spot on here. But for now, he's kind of all over the place. All right, third place on my power rankings is Leclerc. So Charles Leclerc has been really good for Ferrari, and he's putting in amazing performances and just really fantastic drives week in and week out. And really under the radar. They talk about him a little bit every once in a while on the broadcast, but really, if he's in a Mercedes right now, we're talking about him being one of the best. And that's my personal opinion on it. He's been fantastic in that Ferrari, has been pretty much great on Saturdays, great on Sundays, and I don't know any other adjectives I could come up with to say other than just fantastic stuff from him. Last year, we saw him get way more out of a car than was probably worth. That car was probably worth. And he's pushing the envelope here again this year with Ferrari and getting them further up. And it's a team that probably is focused on 2022. And both him and Carlos Sainz are right in my top 10. They're in the top 10 every week, getting points. They're qualifying better every week. And he's right up in the conversation and knocking on the door of podiums constantly. And they will come. Eventually, there will be something that happens at the front of this pack between those Red Bulls and those Mercedes that's going to open the door for Ferrari. And it's basically Leclerc and Norris have been right there. And on any given week, one of them could steal a win or get themselves on the podium just based on some chaos that has not happened yet. But with this many races, it's bound to happen eventually. And he's putting that car right where it needs to be, week in, week out. I'm very impressed, and I can't wait to see what he does in probably better or maybe even equal equipment in a year or two for Ferrari. We could be looking at a future world champion right now. But for now, it is 2021. Ferrari is what it is, and it's not quite there for Mercedes and Red Bull. So I'm just enjoying him putting in really good drives every single week, and he gets to go to his home track in Monaco at the end of this month. Looking forward to seeing what he does there. What else can you say for Max Verstappen that hasn't already been said? He puts in fantastic runs. I think that Red Bull got out-strategied a little bit in the Spanish Grand Prix. They didn't have Checo close enough to be able to maybe change that at all. That said, Max did everything he can. So he doesn't make mistakes, really. I mean, he has. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of examples of that. But recently, I don't feel like he's been making too many mistakes. I think he's been having almost flawless drives. He's just getting beat by a Mercedes that is still a half step, maybe not a full step like it used to be, but a half step ahead of the Red Bull. And he's going up against two Mercedes against the one Red Bull. And they're being defeated on strategy pretty frequently here. Mercedes got their strategy spot on at the Spanish Grand Prix. There's really nothing Max or Red Bull could have done. Even if Checo was up there, I was very impressed with Mercedes' strategy calls. Max just puts in good runs. He's going to finish second a lot. I just hope that he gets a couple more wins so he can get that really mano-y-mano battle between him and Lewis this year, but it is starting to trend towards a Mercedes runaway again. We're not anywhere near it being a runaway, but if Lewis racks up a couple more wins, and we know how good he is at Monaco, a couple more wins, and this could be starting to get a little bit further away from Max and Red Bull. But we will see. Everything changes. If Verstappen can win the Monaco Grand Prix, the fight's back on. So we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to that. But right now, he's just sitting at number 2. It's a little disheartening for me doing the power rankings because I feel like only once since I've started this channel have I had someone else at number 1, Verstappen, after he won that race a couple weeks ago. But of course, let's go to number 1. So Lewis Hamilton, Toto Wolff, Mercedes, the whole package, the real deal, the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. Maybe. I don't know. I just wanted to quote some wrestling, old school wrestling for you guys. But either way, Lewis Hamilton, I mean, what can you say? That race in the Spanish Grand Prix, he was fantastic in it. Mercedes was fantastic in it. The pit stops, that was a big one. They didn't screw it up on pit stops, and that mattered in this race. It could have been the difference between Max overtaking him or not. And for the first time, Red Bull has a little bit slower of a stop, and Mercedes nails their stop. So I thought that was really interesting. And this guy just rises to the challenge, and the team rises to the challenge. Red Bull brought the challenge this year more than they have, arguably, in the last 2 years. And this team's just getting better and better and more impressive. And, you know, every week when I watch a Grand Prix, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Lewis Hamilton. There's a lot of haters out there, a lot of lovers out there of him. For me, I'm one of those guys who gets sentimental about the other drivers winning it sometimes, and the Pierre Gaslys and the Checos, and those are my favorite weeks in Formula One. But it always amazes me how I never cease to be amazed by what Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes can do. And I sat there almost stunned with just how incredibly perfect their strategy was, and what a drive Lewis put in yet again to drive himself up to the top of Formula One, where I don't think he's going anytime soon. It's going to be very hard to knock him and Mercedes off that top pedestal. It's great that Red Bull is bringing the fight a little bit more, but right now it's Lewis's show and Mercedes' world in Formula One, and that's where we're at. So now I'm going to show you the overall standings of where these drivers all fit on all of my power rankings cumulatively to this date. I'm going to do this every single week. We'll place it right up here, and if I snap my fingers, there it should be. Hopefully I get that right in editing. I'm not a big editor yet. When I started this channel, I got really enthusiastic about editing, and then I got a job, a much more complex job than what I was doing. So my editing skills are still growing. But either way, there we have it. You can see we have a battle at the top, and we have a bit of a battle for third, fourth there, and then it will be interesting to see throughout the rest of this year where everyone falls out. And I'm guessing that it's going to be a Lewis Hamilton Max race in my power rankings, just like it is in the driver standings. As always, thank you so much for watching. Once again, if you like my content and my channel, and you made it to the end of this video, I appreciate you. Give me a like, give me a subscribe, and I'll catch you in my next video. I have a couple more videos in my mind of topics that I want to talk about that are not my usual race review and power rankings. Something this channel was known for a lot more when I first started it. Something I've gotten away from because they take a lot more effort to do than these. They take some research, but there's a couple topics that have come to mind and been brought to my attention the last couple weeks that I do want to make some videos on. So keep an eye out for those, and hopefully you like them. Let me know what you think. See you in the next one. Thank you again.